confirm and we're live.
Good evening, everyone, and sorry for the late start. I have 6:05, and so I will hereby call this July meeting of the committees of the Council of the City of Lancaster to order. We will begin with the roll call of members. Mr. Harris?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Arroyo?
Here.
Ms. Bacon?
Here.
Ms. Gregg?
Here.
Ms. Diaz? Mr. Garcia Molina?
Here.
Mr. Soto? And President Smith-Wayo.
Here. Councilors Diaz and Soto are excused this evening. We'll then move to the approval of the June 1st, 2021 committee meeting minutes. I'll hear a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Council comments on the minutes. Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Arroyo?
Aye.
Ms. Bacon?
Aye.
Ms. Gregg?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina?
Aye.
And President Smith-Wayo.
Aye. Thank you. We will begin with the Personnel Committee. As I mentioned previously, Councilor Diaz is excused this evening, and Councilor Bakay will run the Personnel Committee. Councilor?
Thank you, Council President. The Personnel Committee has one item on the agenda this evening. It's the nomination of Jessica Purdy for appointment to the Human Relations Commission. This appointment is to replace Robert Diggs with a term beginning in August of 2021 to September 30th of 2022. I believe Jessica is here this evening. And if you would like to address the committee and just share with us a little bit about you and why you're interested in serving on the Human Relations Commission, and you can go up to the podium there. Please and thank you.
Thank you all for inviting me to offer my own introduction tonight. Jessica Purdy. I grew up here in Lancaster. I left for military service. Took a while before I came back, but I've been back since 2018. I founded a company that is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I'm an LGBT activist here in the city. And one of the reasons I want to be on this committee is because this is my passion. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to impact the city with, is help the city be more inclusive and more diverse and make sure that everything is moving in the right direction in those paths.
Terrific. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your willingness to serve. This is a very important commission, and being a commissioner is an important role within that body. Are there any questions or comments from other members of the committee?
No questions. I have actually had the privilege to know Jesse for a few years now. We were part of the groundwork for the LGBT Coalition, and I am just so thrilled that you're up here and you're going to be contributing in this way. Her skill set and experiences and her passion is exactly what this commission needs, so thank you.
Thank you.
Terrific. Yes, it does seem to be well aligned. With that, I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve.
We're going to be moving forward to the next meeting, you mean?
Oh yeah, I hear a motion to move this to council on the
13.
The 13th.
Second.
So I'll actually put in clarity. I am actually only allowed to vote in a committee meeting where there's not a quorum.
Got it.
So as of right now, it is you and Councilor Garcia.
Well, then I will second Councilor Garcia Molina. All in favor then?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jesse. And that concludes the Personnel Committee this evening.
Thank you, Jesse. All right. That brings us to the Community Planning Committee. Councilor Craig.
Thank you, Council President. Community planning has two items on the agenda. First being Administration Resolution Number 35, authorizing a transfer of 607 and 609 Rockland Street to the Redevelopment Authority of the City of Lancaster for affordable housing. Is there somebody here to? Thank you, Chris.
Good evening, councilors. I see the microphone is working tonight, unlike last time. Thank you, Councilor Craig, for introducing this item. I can give a little background on this particular resolution and happy to answer any questions if I can. You may be familiar with these properties on Rockland Street. It's the addresses are 607, 609, and 611 Rockland Street. They were owned by the same owner, Carlito Montanez, and the city recently acquired these properties from Mr. Montanez. Two of those properties we are recommending are transferred from the city to the redevelopment authority, 607 and 609. These are residential properties. You may know that they were involved in a recent fire in June 2020, and it resulted in a condemnation of both those structures and a displacement of those residents. The properties were severely damaged, but based on an assessment by our building code bureau, it has been indicated that the structures are still sound and can be rehabilitated for residential use. 611 Rockland Street, just to round out the information here, is a vacant lot which provides informal access to Melbourne Park, which is a really neat small park which is on the interior of that particular block. And the city is planning to keep that property to formalize that access to the park, since there has not been formal access in the past. Going back to the transfer of 607 and 609 to the redevelopment authority to RACL, the intent of this transfer is to ensure that they are redeveloped for affordable housing purposes, and they will fall under RACL's policy that they put in place back in 2019, which requires that the property is either, upon redevelopment, is either offered for sale at 80% of the average median income, 80% of the average median income, or the other option is that it is rented at 60% of the area median income. Once RACL sells those properties to a new owner, then they can be redeveloped for those purposes under those particular regulations. So that is the long and the short of the background, and the resolution that is before you tonight is confirming that is possible to transfer these properties to the redevelopment authority.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the committee?
Hey, Councilor Bryan.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Mr. Delps, just for clarification, are there any qualifications of the developers that purchase the property, or is it once they develop it, there's still deed restrictions?
It applies upon the redevelopment of the property.
Thank you.
So in most cases, we see through the RACL process that it is sometimes a small developer that's only doing a handful of properties but is interested in rehabilitating single property. It is possible that we could get a larger developer too, but these are row homes, so it usually attracts those who are interested in a single property, or in this case, it could be two properties at the same time.
Thank you. So that's that.
Any further questions from the committee?
I have a question. So the city acquired these properties. How much did you pay for them?
The total was $90,000 for all the properties together.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. Chris, can you repeat that?
The amount?
Yes.
$90,000 for all the properties together.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? I mean, the council as a whole? No? Questions from the public? No. Okay. I'll move to send this to full council on the 13th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Craig. Thank you,
Thank
Councilor.
you. Our other item on the agenda is resolution number 37, 2021, amending the sewer control plan for LGH tanking project. Is there somebody here to speak to that? I knew that was you.
Good evening, councilors. Good evening, councilors. Good to see you in person. Good evening, Mayor. So this is another sewer plan amendment, this time for the LGH Hankin mixed-use project that's at the intersections of Prince and Frederick and Queen and Frederick. Just as a reminder, this is a 230 residential unit development. It includes restaurant space, medical office, retail, and other residential amenities. This particular sewer planning module actually met a criteria that required it to be legally advertised. So the developer did advertise it because it exceeded 50,000 gallons per day increase. So that advertisement was made earlier this month on June 10th. There's a 30-day public comment period that's required. And we're in the 26th day of that right now, so we have not received any public comment. Those comments would be directed to Mr. Harris as city clerk. As is typical, our water and sewer utility engineers did review this and have provided letters confirming that there is capacity for the development and that it is being recommended for approval. I'm happy to answer any questions or discuss the mechanics of sewer planning modules if there's any need for refreshing.
I was not exactly sure if this is the part about the illegal advertisement. Can you go over that again?
Yeah, sure. So Act 537 is the state law that governs sewer control plans. And when there is an increase of 50,000 gallons of sewer or more per day, it requires a legal advertisement in a paper general circulation, just as we would for any public meeting. And so I have a copy of that if you'd like to see it, but it more or less, in fact, I can just read it for you quickly. It describes the project and the location, 3.25 acre combined commercial and residential project. It's proposing 186 EDUs. This is equivalent dwelling unit. This is the way that they estimate the sewer flows that are coming from the residential units. It's being connected to a public sewer system. The project flows are expected to exceed 50,000 gallons per day, so publication and establishment of a 30-day comment and review period for a sewer facilities planning module is required under Pennsylvania law. The module will be available for 30 days following this publication in the city clerk's office and has the address. Written public comment may be provided to the city clerk at the same location during the review period expiring 30 days after publication of this notice. This notice was reviewed by our solicitor, Barry Handwerker, too, who deemed it to be sufficient according to state law. And the legal ad is submitted with the sewer planning module along with the other materials that are typically submitted, water and sewer capacity letters, planning approval, etc.
Thank you, Douglas. Are there any questions from the committee?
I have one general question. I feel like we've been amending the sewer control plan like relatively frequently. Is there a reason why that is, or
Yes.
can you elaborate on that?
Yes, happy to provide background. So prior to many of you serving on council, there was a period of time, prior to me serving as a planner, there was a period of time where we had insufficient capacity in one of our pump stations. That was upgraded maybe 6 or 7 years ago, roughly. And when we did that, sorry, let me back up. When we did not have that capacity, the DEP was requiring us to submit these sewer planning modules with every development, basically, that increased beyond 799 gallons per day. Why that number? Don't ask me. So we fixed the pump station, expanded our capacity. then the DEP said, okay, your public sewer system now, meets the requirements to provide capacity for the city. That also helped us reduce some combined sewer overflows by expanding that capacity. As of November of 2019, it was shortly after the consent decree was issued and negotiated, DEP determined that because we were overflowing, we had combined sewer overflows, that we were not in accordance with the Clean Streams law. And if you read the Act 537 law, it says that sewer exemptions, meaning they don't have to submit all this paperwork and do these plan amendments, if we're not in compliance with that law, then we have to submit sewer planning modules. So that letter was issued to us in November of 2019. Shortly thereafter, we had our first development come in that exceeded this relatively small increase. 799 gallons is, a few units or maybe a small commercial space. So yes, anytime a new development comes in and there's this this new sewer capacity that's required, you'll see one of these modules come before you.
Thanks.
Sure, no problem.
Questions from council as well? Yep.
May I? Councilor?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask for just a little more, and this is just from my curiosity, Douglas, what does the evaluation of sewer capacity look like, and could we theoretically, what are the odds that one day we just run out per this evaluation method?
Just going to reference some modules just in case.
And I would say if you really want to go into the weeds on this, you should talk to Brian Harner, who does all of the calculations within the Department of Public Works. And so this is really a partnership between Public Works and Community Planning and Economic Development. And so as projects are coming forward, they get kicked over to Brian. Brian does a series of calculations based on pumping station volume, capacity, projects and buildings that come offline or go online. And it doesn't just include properties in the city, but also our suburban customers as well.
Yeah, that's a great estimate, a great way of summarizing it. And a lot of this is driven also by the water needs on property, water in, water out. So the size of the pipes in the area also matter a lot. And of course there is also a planning review to this that generally just asks that whether it's consistent with our zoning ordinance, whether it's consistent with any planning, comprehensive planning, strategic planning in the area, and also whether it meets our subdivision and land development ordinance requirements. In some of those cases, it meets it by variance or meets it by modification. In other cases, it's by right that they're submitting these proposals. So that's the collaboration between planning and public works. There's a whole lot of other paperwork in here that just demonstrates what facilities they're connecting to, proving to the DEP that they're not needing to create a new sewage facility treatment, or that they're not doing any on-lot treatment, which is really where a lot of the DEP's review comes in. It's a lot simpler when they're connected to a public system because we have treatment facilities that are being inspected regularly. When there's on-lot or private treatment facilities, this typically gets a lot more complex and is looked at much more closely by DEP. So there is a point at which we could run out of capacity. It gets very specific to the region of the city relative to pump stations and conveyance. And one example would have been the previously proposed development on Sunnyside. You might remember that there were at least two phases to that. And in the first phase, they didn't need to expand any sewage facilities. In the second phase, they would have needed to dramatically expand a pump station nearby because we basically would have maxed out the capacity in that area. So part of the negotiation was about the need for that investment from the developer. We are not confronted with that in any of these developments so far. Certainly that would be brought to your attention. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Craig.
Absolutely. Are there any questions from the public? None? I'll make a motion to move this to full council on the 13th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Council President, that's all we have on our agenda this evening.
Thank you very much, Councilor Craig. That brings us to Councilor Bakay, the Finance Committee, and I think it's just you and me this evening.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much, Council President. So we have one item on our agenda this evening. It's Bill number 18, 2021, that authorizes refinancing of the 2011 bond issue. Mr. Hopkins gave us a brief summary of this a few weeks ago just to get us prepped for this conversation. It is somewhat complicated. I don't like to use the word complicated, but it's a little complicated, but there is a resulting savings. So it looks like he will be talking us through that this evening. I'll take a header. Thank you. So I will turn the floor over to him.
Thank you, Councilor Bakay. Give me just a second here to queue up my...
Mr. Hopkins, is this one that's going up on the screens?
Yes.
Great.
Bernie, can you switch that to the other... All right, so as we transition from the very exciting topic of sewer modules to equally exciting topic of bond refinancings, still waiting for... Oh, sorry. Of course it's not. Why would things work today? I'm not sure that one's long enough.
Who's actually
This is going to make for scintillating viewing on YouTube.
I think we've all gotten used to it over the last year.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, success. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'll reintroduce folks. Darryl Peck from Concord Public Finance. You've seen him virtually for a little while now. You're seeing him back in 3D. And, oh my God, Dan Desmond, thank you, from Barley Snyder. Barley Snyder is acting as our bond counsel on this, so the drafting of the ordinance that I think you got today from city clerk was done by Bill McCarty, and I'm sure Dan had his fingers in that as well. Let me sort of walk you through a summary of, kind of go through over the email that I sent to you several weeks ago, just for the benefit of the public, and then I'll turn it over to Darryl and we'll kind of walk through this presentation. So the general concept here is that we are doing what I'll refer to as like a plain vanilla refinancing of the 2011 bonds, and also we're proposing for the series of 2015 general obligation note, and we'll dive in a little bit on both of those. And then we're also looking for a combination of restructuring of two other bond issues to do two things. Ultimately, to achieve cash flow savings in the general fund, the water fund, and the sewer fund, but also to the restructuring will allow us to get some of the savings from the refinancing of the 2011 bonds up earlier in the schedule than we would have otherwise. So the basic gist of this breaks down to, and I'll just look at the 5-year savings that I provided to you in that email. In the general fund, roughly about $3 million of savings across 2021, so this year, and also in next year's budget, with a in the next several years, and you'll see a chart on this, but in the next several years, an increase in the annual debt service of about $130,000 or $140,000. And then in the outer years, taking advantage of a significant drop off in our general fund debt service and layering in some additional debt service of around $800,000 in years in the late 20s or early 30s. And again, you'll see this in the chart. And then
Sorry, that mic is not picking up.
nothing is, this worked at 5 o'clock. Oh, you just brought it up. Okay. Okay. There we go. So in the sewer funds, we have a combination of about, well, a little over $4 million in savings. And in terms of the sewer fund, because the largest portion of the 2011 bond issue was in the sewer fund, that's where the most significant savings that we're also going to achieve with the refinancing. So we look at about $2.3 million of savings in 2021, about $1.6 million of savings in 2022, and then somewhere in the neighborhood of about $300,000 of savings in the next 2 years. And those savings, when we're looking, obviously in the general funds, you know, we have a budgeted deficit in 2021 of nearly $5 million. So the target that we were looking at was somewhere in the neighborhood of if we could achieve $3 million in savings with the refinancing and this restructuring, that we would want to proceed that way. In the sewer fund, we have a balanced budget in 2021, but we also have had year over year, and you've heard me mention this at multiple times during the year, cash flow deficits within the sewer fund that are essentially made up by the fact that all of our funds are commingled for cash purposes. So this is going to help certainly over the first 2 years and really over the first 4 years of this is going to help significantly on that cash flow, you know, improving the cash flow within the sewer fund by achieving these savings. And then in the water fund, we have savings in 2021 of about $1.3 million with an increase in debt service in 2022 of about $525,000. And the reason we structured things this way was to achieve savings in 2021 where we have a budgeted water fund deficit of about $3.8 million. So achieving as much as savings as we could in 21. The increase in 2022 is, I'll use the term, it's okay, only because we're also looking at a Public Utility Commission water rate case in 2021 that would take effect in 2022. So we anticipate additional revenue coming in from suburban customers of the city because of that proposed rate increase. We don't know what the level of that rate increase is yet. That's what is being worked on now. But ultimately, that rate increase will go into effect sometime during 2022. One other piece that I mentioned in the email that I wanted to correct was a portion of this refinancing and restructuring has to be done as a taxable borrowing. If you really wanted to get into the weeds of this, both Darrell and Dan can address it, but essentially it's the rules of refinancing is what makes us have to do this as a taxable borrowing, a portion of it, about $3.5 million worth, or $3 million worth. In the email that I sent you, I said we're going to do the get proposals from banks and then weigh those against what we think we might get from a bond issue. The reality is that the note route for the taxable piece of this is really going to be the way to go because aside from interest rates that we can expect from a bank note, there's also a lot more flexibility in the terms of that borrowing versus doing a bond issue. So what you see up on the you'll see on the screen is really two series of borrowings. There's a bond issue itself, and then the other piece of it is will be a note. That is, so you'll have a Series A and a Series B. All of this is being handled within the same ordinance, so you won't see two separate ordinances for the two separate series, just one piece of legislation. And with that, I'll, if I can, turn it over to Darrell here, and we can walk through the presentation.
Good evening. Very good to be before you, actually before you physically. And with that introduction, thank you, Patrick. The number of slides in my presentation will certainly dovetail with what Patrick did in his memo and recited for you already. Good terminology The refinancing of the 2011 bonds is what is kind of the plain vanilla refinancing. On page 1, in refinancing the 2011 bonds based on current market conditions or current interest rates, you could save about $6.3 million across the 3 funds. So those are separated in columns 2, 3, and 4 by fund. And Patrick said that the majority of the issue was sewer back in 2011. So the general fund is about $3.48 million. The sewer fund principal is about $20 million, and the water fund is about $6.8 million. You recall, when we do these financings, we always do one bond issue, and then I do all the breakout schedules by fund for obviously administrative and cash flow purposes. So, you know, we know what piece of the bond issue is general fund, what piece is sewer, and what piece is water. So, if you did just this refinancing by itself, the general fund would save about $450,000. You can see that would be about $328,000 in 2021, about $122,000 in 22, and thereafter pay what you otherwise would have paid. Sewer fund, again, the tremendous one, just because of the way how far up I could push these savings. You'd save, you know, about $800,000 to $900,000 for the next 4 years. You save $1.2 million in 25 and $440,000 in 26, and then pay what you otherwise would have paid. In the water fund, you save about $630,000 in 2021, $280,000 in 2022, and again, thereafter pay what you otherwise would have paid. So, great, you know, you're going to get all these savings, but you got to wait. So, 2 slides later, we're going to talk about how we're going to enhance that, meaning we can save the money sooner. The second slide, or the second page, is a refinancing of the 2015 note. And this is one of these like, gee, if this is all there was, would we do it? Maybe not. I know $100,000 is a lot of money. You want to save it every time you can. But here, as a sort of a come along, if you will, once you do your refinancing, why wouldn't you do this? The 2015 note is bank loan with one of the banks, and it's refinanceable or prepayable right now. So in this case, it's predominantly general fund. About $3.8 million of the $4 million loan is general fund, and about $300,000 is water fund. Same scenario we just talked about, obviously smaller numbers. General fund would save about $100,000, and the water fund would save about $8,000. Again, as a come along, why would you do this? Okay? All right, this is where we get kind of a little more complicated, or hitting some targeted objectives, and I think that's key here. Is we all know, you probably say, sure, let's refinance these bonds and let's be done. But, you know, based upon the items that Patrick introduced and talked about, I think we're trying to get here a little bit more target objective. So on page 3, we're going to refinance a portion of the 2016 bonds that would otherwise be payable in 2021, and a portion of the 2019 bonds that are also sewer fund that are payable in 2022. The red numbers are savings, meaning reduced payments. So by refinancing those 2 additional pieces, we can save another $1,478,000 and save another $1.1 million in 2022, and basically shift that debt that would have been payable in those 2 years into 2022, 23, 24, and 25. That offsets the savings that we saw on page 1. So, you know, bringing over in column 5, that was the savings you saw from doing just the 2011 bonds by themselves. So column 6 then is the net, kind of after we do these 2 additional transactions or 2 refinancings. This is where you're going to save $2.3 million in 2021 instead of column 5, about $2 million in 22. $300,000 in 23 and 24. So that's your net savings or net result. So you're still going to save almost $4.9 million overall over the entire term. And key being, you're going to save about $4.3 million over the next 2 years instead of having it kind of dribble in over the next 5 years. Questions on that? And I'm going to show pictures, and everybody likes pictures better than numbers, I think. So when we get to the pictures, I think it's all going to come together even better for you.
Just one point, do any of these proposed refinances
make the debt service go out any longer than was originally projected?
Yes, they will.
Okay.
When you see the slides, I'll help you
Thank you.
identify that.
Great.
Okay.
Councilor Beckett, if I may. I think my question is, at some point, and maybe it's not this second, some contextualizing of the immediate cash flow advantages of saving this money sooner as opposed to over the length of the debt service would be helpful.
You want to just sit now or keep going?
Well, let's do that at the graphs.
Okay.
It'll be easier.
Okay. All right, on page 4, this is the water fund. This is the, you could have saved about $600,000 in 2021 from the 11 bonds we talked about, and about $280,000 in 2022 from this refinancing of the 11 bonds. Same concept here. We're going to refinance another $700,000 of 2016 bonds that would have been payable towards the end of this year. And the net result is, in the red box, column 6, is instead of saving $600,000 in 2021, we're now going to save about $1,350,000. You are going to pay $450,000 more than you otherwise would have paid in 2022, and thereafter pay what you otherwise would have paid. So net, your net present value savings will be about $916,000 in the water fund. And that's to garner those savings until your rate increase is effective as approved by the PUC. Again, more of a targeted objective or targeted need we'll address. The general fund is probably the most complicated. This is where the goal or the objective was to achieve cash flow savings of about $3 million across 2021 and 2022. You know, doing just that refinancing 11 bonds, you would have saved about $400,000. So here we want to, again, restructure payments of the 2016 bonds and 2019 bonds, the general fund portions, in 2021 and 22. So again, the red numbers in columns 2, 3, and 4. We're going to refinance or restructure about $1.1 million of payments that we do in 2021. About $1.1 million of 2016 bonds that are payable in 22, and about $450,000 of payments that would have been due in the 19 bonds in 2022. Sliding across to the right in column 8, the net resulting savings of this entire package is to save about almost $1.5 million in 2021, save about $1.7 million in 2022. In 23 to 2029, you will pay about $130,000 more. I think we're viewing that as, using Patrick's word, okay or manageable. And when you see the graph on the next page, I think you'll see it. You will pay $800,000 more than you otherwise would have paid in 2030 through 32. Still, net, you're going to save about $370,000 present value in the general fund. Again, I think everybody likes pictures better than numbers. If you flip over to page 6, this goes straight into the general fund. So the red bars are the existing general fund debt service payments. You see we were about $6.4 million out through 2029, and it would have dropped down to a little over $4 million in 2030, and then continue to step down. So the black bars are then the resulting debt service net of these savings and the additional payments. So in 2021 and 22, the sum total of payments go down by $3 million. In 2023 through 2029, you can see your annual payments increase by that $130,000, manageable in terms of looking outward. And in 2030 through 2030, 31, and 32, while your payments are going to go up by $800,000 above what they would have otherwise been, you can see there will still be a pretty significant reduction to still maintain budgetary capacity outward in those years. So maybe, Ms. Beke, your first question is, are we extending anything? Not general fund debt service in its entirety, but you can see we are adding 3 additional years of higher payments. So, full disclosure, response to the question, I hope. but still maintaining a good sizable reduction, looking outward to, kind of future capital project needs or debt service needs. Page 7 is the same graphical presentation of the sewer fund. Again, the significant savings in 2021 and 22 of about $2.3 million and $2.2 million respectively. In 2023 and 24, your payments are actually still going to go down another $300,000 to sort of knock down that little spike you have there. And then these bar graph shows you're still going to pay what you otherwise would have paid. So this one is, I think, very straightforward to reduce your payments significantly over the next 2 years. 2 years beyond that, and pay what you otherwise would have paid. Do you want to touch on these individually? Or
yeah, well, yeah, so the only thing I'd add there is, in terms of, you were asking, Council President, about the sort of contextualizing why we were looking at savings earlier on. And the one where that's most significant is in the sewer fund. And really that's just a matter of, we can, through the combination of the refinancing and the restructuring, we can move that savings up as early as is shown on this graph. And the reason for that really is just straight up, we want to, as quickly as possible, improve the sewer fund's cash position, because that does have an impact. As you remember, some years in the past when we've gone for a tax anticipation note toward the end of the year, the real driving force in the need for that tax anticipation note for cash flow purposes is the sewer fund. It's improved somewhat after we resolved, the history of issues with LASA and East Lancaster Township and bulk sewer, but this is really going to be, this will be the most significant help that we can provide basically to the sewer fund to reduce those debt service costs for 2 years and then a little bit for the next 2 years after that. Because otherwise it would be strung out over a 6-year period and we just wouldn't be achieving the savings as quickly as we need to.
Right, and that all makes sense to me, which confers to us like what immediate advantage, right? Like there's more cash and therefore
just better overall city cash flow. So when we, each time we go through one of these bond issues, whether we're doing a new issue or we're doing a refinancing, we're also going through a review of our bond rating, and those are long, interesting calls, and we spend a fair amount of time because of the cash flow issues that we've had both in water fund and in sewer fund. We spend a fair amount of time concentrating on that because ultimately what Moody's is looking at for a bond rating overall for the city, while they are looking at a bond rating overall for the city, they're also looking in each individual fund and saying, okay, can the sewer fund, if it were to stand on its own, could it pay its annual debt service? When there's a cash deficit on a running basis in the sewer fund, the general answer to that is no. We're able to do that as a city because we commingle all of our cash.
Right.
And so if sewer fund is short at one period of time, but general fund is flush, there's interfund cash borrowing. It would be much better, obviously, to be in a position where we don't have that at any time throughout the year, and that's what's really going to help the sewer fund.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
The last slide is the graphical presentation of the water fund. Again, I think this is pretty straightforward. In 2021, we're going to garner the savings or reduce payments of about $1.3 million. You will pay that extra $450,000 that you otherwise would have paid in 2022, and thereafter pay what you otherwise would have paid. So I think it's probably the same description. I'll let Patrick speak though. Garner the $1.3 million of savings, pay a little bit more in 2022 when you're going to have the additional revenues to the PUC case. But really the same objective as the sewer fund.
And the only other thing I wanted to address is back on the general fund and just looking, I had this all set up that everything would work here and now it's not happening. But I had a pointer so I could show you this, but that doesn't work for you all since the screen is behind you. But if you look at the savings in 2021 and 2022, obviously the first thing is we have a deficit in the general fund, and so we want to help resolve that deficit. But the other thing that we've been looking at over a period of years is what's our capacity in some of these later years. And there is a significant drop here between 2029 and 2030. We're using some of that drop off, but we still have a significant drop in debt service. And the sort of concept in this all along is as we're looking out, 5, 10, 15, 20 years in terms of the city's capital needs, we have some room to grow in terms of adding on additional debt service in some of these later years without having any impact whatsoever on the general fund budget. The further or the closer we get to 2030, when we have that drop off, the more flexibility we'll have in doing borrowing for capital needs within the general fund. That said, we've also done a lot of the significant projects in the general fund, right? We've now financed 2 fire stations. We have a police station that is about 16 years old. We did this building. We built the Public Works Operations Center. What we have a lot of is parks, and I foresee that in the future, that is going to be one of the probably more significant capital project needs. So anyway, we have some room to grow here without having an impact on the general fund budget, even with doing this restructuring and adding those 3 additional years of about $300 or $800,000 of debt service in 2030, 31, and 32.
And I'll just add to that, that it's a policy decision as well as a budgetary decision about how much debt the city takes on. And so we are at 8% of our general fund budget annually, and moving beyond that has a lot of impacts in terms of other costs that we carry through the general fund, as well as the millage rate for city taxpayers. So we've been holding steady at that 8%, which is why you see that top line sort of steady over time, because we try not to, well, not try, we don't go over that limit. And that is that red line, that's that level spend between 21 and 2029.
Yeah, that 8% is sort of a self-imposed limit. We've hit a little bit over that a few years, but like to the, a couple tenths of a percent. But we set that as our sort of our unofficial cap because we want to continue to maintain a lot of room that we can, as much room as we can in our operating budget, and not eat it up with annual debt service. There are third-class cities in Pennsylvania that have 10, 12, 15% of their general fund budget is made up of debt service, and it just reduces your flexibility. We don't want to go there. We want to have as much flexibility as we can. So we think the way this is structured provides that upfront savings, but also still provides flexibility in the outer years, because 2030 is just around the corner.
Thank you very much. I do have another question for you. If you could just talk us through what the proposed timeline would be for this. And you had mentioned that this could end up being a bond issue or could be refinancing. Is that correct? Can you clarify that?
Yeah, so in terms of I'll clarify your second question first. There will be a bond issue and a bank note. Series A is the bond issue, Series B would be the bank note. We have, Daryl's firm put out a request for proposals last week, I believe it was, for banks to return proposals by,
I think it's like this.
we extended it. So
Yeah, I think it's like the first week of
August?
Yes.
Okay. And that will be only for the taxable portion of this borrowing, of this structuring. The rest of the schedule will run this meeting for the introduction. The first reading of the ordinance will come to council at your meeting next week, assuming you vote to move this forward. And then we wouldn't be back for a second reading likely until August 24th. And the reason for that is part of that Moody's process is also looking at audited financials. We have, our last audited financials are from 2019. The audit for 2020 is in process and getting close to finishing up, at least to get to draft audit, and we can provide that to Moody's as part of their rating process. So we need to have that audit nearly completed or completed by the time we go to the auction. So the timing of this would be the auction, bond auction would be held on the morning of the 24th, assuming that's the date we move forward, August 24th. And then we would have the ordinance come back with all of the lengthy motion that ends up getting read with all of the results of the bond auction. And by that time, we also have the proposals back from the banks, so we know both what the taxable portion rate would be and also what the tax exempt portion would be.
Thank you very much. I'll open this up to questions or comments from other members of the committee.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, Patrick, in terms of risk, outside of those 3 years that we should be aware of, are there any other risks to doing this?
So the short answer is no. The longer answer is, and I'll go back to the general fund piece because I think that's where this discussion makes the most sense. So our general rule of thumb when we have brought refinancings to City Council is that we would save at least 3% of the outstanding principal. So on this screen, I'm looking at column 8 at the very bottom here, and where we would, the savings that we would achieve. Darrell talked about that 2015 note, which is primarily general fund. That savings is only like 2.6%. Even though $100,000 of savings is a big thing, a big number, percentage-wise, it might not make sense to do it on its own. Same token, if we were bringing to you this restructuring and refinancing, and we had $3 million of savings up front, but we were showing you $3.5 million of additional costs in the outer years, that number would be negative. I wouldn't be sitting here making that presentation to you, right? Because we wouldn't make that decision. We wouldn't make that recommendation. So it's really that ultimate savings number across the entire life of the outstanding debt that we're focusing on. This one is a little closer than the others are, and really that's, especially in the sewer fund, that's a function of the large majority of the 2011 bonds that we're refinancing are sewer related, and there's just so much more savings in sewer than there is in the other two funds.
Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from council? Comments from the public? Hi, Tony.
Hi.
We need to trade off mics.
Thank you. Tony Dasher, 700 block of New Holland Avenue. I'm not as well versed in this as you are, Patrick. Could you explain, for my own education, I know the city has a bond rating, right? How does refinancing, how can we improve our bond rating, I guess is my question. Because it is still from the drop position a few years ago, right? And would that matter, I guess?
So, since we only have one light, let's do this one here. We can tag team. So the city's bond rating is A3. The most significant reason for the reduction that we had from an A1 to an A3 was actually related to the cash flow issues that I talked about before, and the weakness in the cash flow position of both the water fund and the sewer fund, and that if you were looking at them as standalone entities, when they're in a cash deficit, that also means that technically they're not able to make debt service payments. Again, we know we can because we have this commingled cash, but improving the position of both of those two funds will help. Certainly not going to, Moody's isn't going to tell us that they're going to, hey, if the cash flow positions are better, we're going to increase your bond rating, but that's one of the factors. The other, if we were to get back up to A1, the other issue would really be just be year-over-year improvements in cash flow, improvements in the financial position, primarily of the sewer fund and the water fund, but also, sustained economic growth in the city is definitely one of the factors. Each time when we go through a bond rating review, we provide Moody's with additional information about economic development projects that are either in the pipeline right now or at least have been proposed. And there's a whole sort of series of other questions that we go through that relate to basically just the financial health of the city, which in relative terms to, when I compare with other cities in Pennsylvania, is quite strong. When I compare to some other municipalities, typically the suburban ones around the city, not quite as healthy.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, if I have a second question?
Sure.
Okay. So the only other question I have then is, I noticed that our payments did significantly decrease. Is there a benefit to paying some of that ahead of time, or are we not allowed to do that? I understand improving the cash flow situation, but could we potentially improve it more if we continued like the higher payments with the lower overall costs?
I may have done this to Daryl too. I'll look for winces on your face if I get anything wrong here. But generally speaking, the debt service that you saw in those charts is scheduled debt service that we're mandated to pay in the given year. If we are prepaying, essentially what we're doing is restructuring a bond issue. And in a way, we're doing that, not quite exactly, but we're doing that in a way with this restructuring, in that we're moving some debt service in one year to another year. We're doing the flip, really, of what Mr. Dasher was talking about. But if we were to, there's no such thing basically as prepaying debt service like there is prepaying on a note without going through a refinancing or a restructuring process. Did I miss anything there, Daryl?
No, I mean, it's certainly, no, it's certainly policy, could you prepay debt? Sure. It's kind of like in your personal life. But certainly, most all the assets that the city has financed, you finance it typically over the responsible, useful life to make it equitable. You build a city hall, you don't pay for it with cash, because people, not only is people enjoying it today, but people are going to be enjoying that or using that for the next 15, 20 years. So I think in municipal government, certainly it's kind of responsible and equitable to finance it over a reasonable and appropriate time period.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, both of you. Hearing no other comments, and thank you both for thoroughly explaining this to all of us this evening. I will make a motion then to move Bill number 18 to the full council meeting for first reading on July 13th.
Second.
All in favor then? Aye. Thank you very much. And that concludes the Finance Committee this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yep. And thank you, Councilor Becquet. That moves us to the Public Works Committee. I believe Councilor Arroyo will be chairing this evening, and again, it'll be you and me.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
I'll call to the Public Works Committee to order. We have 5 items on our agenda today, beginning with Administration Bill number 16, 2021, amending the Water Service Termination Ordinance. I believe Mr. Campbell, are you here to speak to that ordinance?
As it turns out, for that particular one, it is an administrative services item because it is a treasury-led element. So Patrick would be talking to this item.
Oh, perfect. Thank you for the clarification. Mr. Hopkins, back to you.
Okay, we will get all of this technology sorted out at some point during 2021, hopefully by the August meetings. Okay, give me just a second to get this other presentation up here. And this is actually going to be This presentation is sort of a kind of a long preamble to what is proposed in Bill number 16, which is actually a relatively small change, but I wanted to give you some more context to what we're trying to do here. So we're going to look here at the COVID-19 pandemic impact on city water and sewer customers, and that impact being reflected in delinquent payments or delinquent accounts that we're seeing for both our city customers, inside city customers, and also the suburban customers, so outside of the city. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our utility assistance efforts that we have undertaken, and then talk about the language of the bill and what we're trying to achieve with the change in the language. So one of the things I want to give just a bit of context to is when I talk about the Public Utility Commission, or I talk about outside city customers, the structure of our utility system is somewhat unusual in Pennsylvania in that we, the city of Lancaster, both own and operate the water and sewer systems ourselves. In a lot of other places, they might be a municipal authority or something like that. Because of that structure, the Public Utility Commission regulates rates and also terms of service for customers who are outside of the city of Lancaster. Inside the city of Lancaster, in effect, the administration and city council together operate as the governing body for water customers inside of the city. So that's why when we bring like an annual budget to you that might have an increase in water rates for city customers, that ordinance is going through you and doesn't have to go through any kind of a public utility commission process. And the concept is residents who are customers can come to city council meetings. They have elected representatives who oversee their rates and the structure of the system and the services that they're provided. If you live in Manhattan Township and you're a city water customer, you're not represented by you all or by the mayor. So the Public Utility Commission steps in and has that governing oversight and rate oversight jurisdiction for outside of the city. And the same goes for the sewer system, although it's a much smaller piece of the sewer system is outside of the city. With water, it's almost 70% of the revenue comes from customers who are outside of the city. So our suburban customers, residential, commercial, and industrial. In the sewer system, it's about 90% of the revenue comes from customers who are inside of the city. There are only about 3,500 customers outside that we direct bill. And that's not counting all sewer customers. So just a bit of context for you all and members of the public. So the first slide here is really taking a look at the end of 2019, so pre-pandemic, and then the end of 2020, and looking at, on the left-hand side, this is city customers who are at some level of delinquency, and I'll just point this up here. So I'm using, obviously if you're 1 day late, technically that's delinquent. What I've done here is look at this after 31 days delinquent, and so in these individual date categories of delinquency. So 31 to 60 days delinquent, 61 to 90, 91 to 120, and then over 120 days delinquent. And then this is an amalgamation of all of these. So this 31 plus overdue is a combination of all of them. So as you can see, we always have delinquent accounts. So this is just inside the city. But you can see, between 2019, which is the blue, and 2020, which is whatever color it is. It's orange on my computer, but it shows up a little differently here. So, and you can see that in each of these sort of categories, the impact because of we're going to assume the majority of these delinquencies are due to pandemic and customers' inability to pay. Then you look at out here, 412,000 at the end of 2019, went up to almost $1.2 million at the end of 2020. And I'll show you some other numbers in a next slide that shows you where we are as of the end of June. Our suburban customers have, by ratio, if you look at these charts compared to the city customers, it's roughly the same ratio. But if you look at where we cap out with total delinquencies over 31 days overdue, outside of the city, $350,000, well, $321,000 is where we cap out, and we're at $1.2 million inside of the city. That's a combination of two things, one of which we know and one of which we assume. The one that we know is that the city customers' bill, and this is really a combination of stormwater, sewer, and water. So this is all those utilities combined. So inside the city, if you're a water customer, you're also automatically a sewer customer, and you also have a stormwater bill. If you're outside of the city, you don't have a stormwater bill because the city can't charge stormwater fees for outside of the city. You might have a sewer bill from the city, but it's less likely, it's more likely than not that you don't. And then you do have a water bill. So part of the issue is that the bills inside of the city are 3 bills. The bills outside of the city for most customers is just 1 bill, it's only water. The part that we don't know but we assume is that most of these delinquencies are related to COVID. I mean, it just makes sense if you look at the two of those and that the ratios are about the same, that the majority of the impact here and the increase in delinquent payments from 19 to 20 is COVID-related unemployment, just inability to earn enough to pay those bills. So that's the sort of inside and outside city context. Again, this is as of December of 2019 versus December of 2020. Then this chart is looking at and this was a aging update that I got from Megan Baum, who runs the Treasury office, as of the end of June. And you can see here, inside the city is the blue, and outside city or suburban customers is the green. And you just see what that looks like compared when you combine the 31 plus overdue, $950,000 of delinquent accounts inside the city and about $350,000 outside of the city. Again, those other issues with, it's water, sewer, stormwater inside the city and not outside of the city is an impact, but clearly there's a bigger impact inside the city with delinquent accounts. So this is a lead-in, really, just so you have the context. I want to talk a little bit about the ERAP program, which is the emergency rental. It's the emergency rental assistance program, but utility payments are also allowed, or an allowable expense within ERAP. The eligibility criteria certainly is, if you look at the household size limitations, so a single household earning $44,550 is an eligible individual who could benefit from ERAP funding to pay their utility bills and pay rental arrearages and a few other items. When the ERAP program was initially funded with about $16.3 million in federal dollars with the CARES Act that went to Lancaster County, and then that was a direct allocation to the county. And then there's another close to $20 million of funding that the county is eligible to use. That's indirect funding that went from the feds to the state. You may have seen recently some articles about how undersubscribed the ERAP program is. We've tried to, in a couple of different ways, get some information out to our customers. So in early June, we sent this is one side of a postcard that went out to all of our customers, both city customers and suburban customers, to let them know about the program. The under subscription, though, this is a chart that was available on the county website. So with that, even just with the direct funding of $16 million, you can see that the total actually paid out, distributed so far through June 22nd was only about $2.3 million. And I put that red square around the utilities part because you can see that in terms of rental arrears and current rent, utilities is the very lowest. We have, as of the end of June, not had any payments that have come to the city for water, sewer, or stormwater through the ERAP program. We had a very small handful of inquiries that went from a customer into the ERAP program, but none that have actually resulted in payments. So I assume that the majority, or maybe all, of that utility payments reflected there is PP&L and UGI. So the next slide here is just looking at, this is an article that ran last week, just talking about that under subscription. So, you know, as of June 22nd, only $2.2 million in rental utility and assistance costs have been paid for 364 county residents. So the ERAP program is not just inside the city, it's for any county resident. So, you know, the County Housing Authority is the one that's administering the ERAP program. They have, I believe it's 17 partners throughout the county, including CAP, that is working to administer the program. The feedback has been that it's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of documentation of income issues. Council President, I'm sure, is aware of this, with just how much an individual resident, whether they're a property owner or, well, a renter, has to go through to be eligible for the ERAP funding. But that funding is available there, and the arrearages that I talked about with our water, sewer, and stormwater are eligible costs, as long as the household is eligible based on those income guidelines. So that is a long preamble to get to what we're doing with the city code change that you have in front of you. So when we implemented our service termination moratorium, I believe it was about a day or two before the Public Utility Commission announced it statewide last year. To date, we've still had a moratorium in place for service terminations. There's been a number of changes at the state level. There's been a few additional changes to PUC regulations that we wanted to go back and look at all of our the communication that goes to our customers, whether they're city customers or suburban customers, and make sure that the timing of all of our notices, our late notices, and eventually shut-off notices are meet PUC regulations. We went through that process. As you know, we have a relatively new Public Utility Commission, PUC Council that reviewed all of the regs up to date and gave us some new language that's basically mandated on all of our, any of the communications that we have to customers that have delinquent accounts. So we then went back and looked at, within the city code, as I said before, you know, city council and the administration has purview over the regulations for inside city customers. The language on the left is what's been in the existing code for, it looks like, several decades. It's not what we have done in practice, but in the city code right now, if a monthly or quarterly bill isn't paid within 30 days after it's due, the water can be shut off with 5 days notice to a resident, whether they're a tenant or a property owner. The practice has been that we have used the same process for city customers and for suburban customers. But again, in that review that we had of the PUC regulations, those notice requirements and the language in them and the timing of them has changed. So rather than amend the city code to bring it up to current PUC regulations and have a year or two or whatever down the road, those regulations to change again, what we want to do is incorporate language into the code that says that the city's process for delinquency and for service termination will meet PUC requirements that are in place at the time. So we don't have to come back to you each time that there may be PUC changes. So the process that's mandated by the Public Utility Commission is a little bit different for in what they call a landlord ratepayer, which means that the property owner, if they're renting, is the landlord ratepayer. We have to notify any time that we are leading to a service termination because there's a delinquent account. The landlord has to get a 37-day notice. The tenant in that same situation then has to get a 30-day notice. And then a second notice is required to be mailed either to the landlord and or the tenant at 10 days out from a proposed service termination. And then there is a follow-up in person, somebody who's employed by the city at the Treasury office does a physical posting on the property so that the either the property owner or the tenants are aware that there's a potential of a service termination. And then finally, on the day where there is a service termination, there's another posting at the property. What we are wanting to avoid is that last one, right? We do not want to get a service termination. In the 2020 budget that was adopted before the world changed, you all approved a $50,000 combination of money from the water fund and the sewer fund to pay for a utility assistance program that we can, where somebody may have their service terminated for lack of payment, they could go through Community Action Partnership, access those utility assistance funds, have the delinquent amount paid to avoid service termination. Because service termination can lead to, among a whole host of other issues, could ultimately lead to eviction of whether they're tenants or even a property owner, because the property needs to be condemned for lack of water. So again, we're trying to avoid that last one on here. At the same time, we do eventually need to restart our whole collection process. We can't continue to have $1.4 million in delinquent accounts out there. So part of the process that we had worked out with the Community Action Partnership pre-COVID was a process, basically a referral. So when we would get to the point of physically posting a property, and actually even earlier on in this process, one, we offer payment plans. So whether they're a tenant billed customer or a landlord customer, or just a regular property owner, they have options for payment plans, and that's actually laid out in the delinquent notices as they are reworded with our PUC Council's assistance. Then we would have a notification to customers at the door on that 3-day service termination that the ERAP program is available to them, and the city's utility assistance program funding is still available to them also, because we provided CAP with that $50,000 in 2020, and none of that has been spent, and there's another $50,000 in the 2021 budget. So there are really 2 buckets of funding that are available. We would then make that referral to CAP. If a customer follows up with that referral, they get into CAP's navigation program that doesn't just assist them with their specific utility delinquency, but can also help them with other issues related to their family finances or their personal finances. And again, the option or the object here is to avoid service termination. Additionally, we've done, in addition to that postcard that we did, we've also been regularly putting postings on social media about the ERAP program. As customers call into Treasury, they can also, Treasury staff can also notify customers who might have a delinquency that the ERAP program is available and refer them to, either the online system or the phone call system that they have set up. Again, our partner with the Utility Assistance Program is CAP, but there are 16 other organizations around the county that are assisting with the ERAP program. So the ordinance itself is a very small change. We think that it's a good change for equity so that we make sure that in the city code we're reflecting the same protections that the Public Utility Commission provides to outside, to suburban customers, and give that same protection and timelines and everything to city customers.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Question, how many municipalities outside of the city of Lancaster do we currently service water for?
For water, I believe there are 8 other municipalities. They're basically the metropolitan ring around the city, and it's not all of all those municipalities. For Manheim Township, it's all of Manheim Township. For Lancaster Township, it's all of Lancaster Township. Sort of further out that you get from the city, the less of those customers that we're providing. I actually intended to find a map somewhere of this system, but generally speaking, it's like 8 or 9 suburban municipalities.
Thanks. And then my last question is, as far as the ERAP program and the funds that are available for assistance, how long do we have to use those funds for?
one other council member might know this better than me. I believe that program is, that eligibility goes at least into 2022, and it may go longer than that, but I'm not sure.
I want to say that applications have to be received by September 30th, 2022. But if you, I think it was in the article, so if you tab back to the LNP.
September 30, 2022, right.
Any questions from the committee or council as a whole?
Councilor Rowe, man? Sure. Do we have any breakdown, and I'm guessing that the answer is no, but I figure I'll swing for it anyway. Do we have any breakdown on our delinquent customers? Do we have any way to correlate that to their household income? Do we have that information for them?
No.
Okay.
That would be wonderful information to have, but no, we don't. And remember, this is also a combination. I think there are about roughly 3,500 customers that are renters. So they're in their lease, they're responsible for utility payments, at least the city's utility payments. That's out of about 45,000 customers. So the vast majority of our customers are homeowner occupied or industrial commercial properties. But no, we don't have that ability to, or the data to make that connection.
Do we have the ability to fudge it by geography? Like, could we pin them on a map and then say, like, what census tracts are they in, and who and how are they likely to be?
We could, yes, because we've got the property ID numbers for the customers. So we would be able to geolocate those.
Okay. No, and the reason I ask is, and this is good, and thank you for bringing this to us. I think just my immediate reaction, and I haven't decided yet if it's legitimate or not, you know, when we start re-engaging collections, it's, you know, what's the good that we get out of re-engaging collections versus the impact on the potential consumers. I think you had I'm actually not authorized to give you the floor at the moment. Councilor Royal, thank you.
Any other questions from council?
I do. You asked that one question. When we come together for council to talk about this, could you let us know the breakdown of how many people's water actually was shut off in the past year?
None.
None, okay.
None. For delinquency,
Okay.
right? I mean, there are other issues. People request to have their water turned off because they travel or whatever, but
So then-
none for delinquents.
There was a moratorium that was extended.
Yeah, we put our moratorium in place, it was soon after March 15th.
Okay.
I want to say somewhere in the 20s or something, but it was March of last year.
And can we look at the previous year's data of how many were?
For 2019?
Yeah.
Yeah, and just anecdotally, the sort of collection funnel goes from this many delinquent accounts. And then as the additional notices come out, there's a smaller and smaller number of delinquent accounts. When we get to the point, right now it's a 5-day shut-off notice that gets posted previously, a 5-day shut-off notice that would get posted at a property. That has a significant impact in collections. The number of properties that eventually actually get service termination is relatively small compared to the full delinquent number, but I can get those numbers for you.
Councilor Ryan? So do we have a projected timeline or idea when we may begin this process again? And if so, and when we do, will folks that are sort of already in these, 31, 90, 120 days, will they get these notices anew? Will they be afforded that opportunity to get the notices that we would put in place?
The notices themselves are in process of getting, we just got the final language, I think it was about a week and a half ago, so we're getting the notices updated within the system. We don't yet have a date specific for restarting the collection process. That said, the PUC puts a moratorium on service disconnections for delinquency at November 30th. So between December 1st and March 31st, there are no service terminations for delinquencies. That's been a long-standing Public Utility Commission rule that we've also used inside the city. So it would be before November 30th, but we want to make sure two things. One, that we've got every regulatory requirement complied with in our noticing, and that may involve sending additional notices out to folks who are in any of those delinquent categories if they haven't had the right, if they haven't previously gotten a notice that meets PUC requirements. And then two, we want to provide as much time as possible for customers to get connected with the ERAP program so that they have the funding available to deal with their delinquency. So I say those two things, and at the same time, we do ultimately have to restart a collection process. It's not a process that any of us like to go through, but it is a process that we need to restart at some point.
Sure. My suggestion would just be that anyone who's already in any of those statuses, when we do that, receives all of the benefits of these changes.
Of the new, right.
And they will,
Notice.
they haven't received any notices thus far
They
because
would.
there's been a moratorium.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? From the public?
I have one more question actually, Loretta. When we also meet next time, will those kind of accounts that are in debt, is there an average that is debt like owed by the household?
We have it by individual account.
Okay.
So now I don't think in those aging reports, I don't think I have it broken down by whether they're a commercial customer, industrial, or residential. I mean, it's usually obvious on the account name, but not always.
And so then as long as you engage in the processing of a payment plan, then you're good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Great. Any questions from the public?
I had a few.
Yeah. I actually have a lot of questions. I'm going to try and stay somewhat organized. So I'm understanding that 10% of this money's been distributed already. I'm understanding that there's an application process that it seems that people are, for whatever reason, not completing the whole way through. What are the odds, and this might sound really far-fetched, but what can the city do to potentially, if these funds, are the rules on them malleable on some level of government, and if so, what level of government? And what would need to happen potentially for the city to, like, again, really reaching out there, but unilaterally forgive these utility debts and apply collectively for this funding to be reimbursed to the city? Is that something the county is like willing to consider? Because it seems like there's a paperwork issue for individuals.
Yeah, so I can jump in there, if only because Justin, Evie, and I have had a conversation about exactly this thing. The requirements are very strict, and I think Chris could clarify for you, or if Susanna was here, God bless her, like the requirements that come attached to like HUD funding and HUD grants are very long.
Right.
And so while the application is long, all the elements where people seem to be falling down is the supporting documentation. And this is the thing that HUD specifically wants. The county is required to report back to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Yes, we went through a process and established these qualifying forms of documentation to prove that indeed money went to people you have determined to be eligible via A, B, C, D, X, Y, and Z. And so my understanding from my conversations with Justin, though I would encourage you to speak to the Housing and Development Authority yourself, is that they cannot bundle the distribution of that funding because the regulations that came with it require that documentation be provided for each individual household.
Okay.
That's a fantastic idea, and I think something that we would love to do, but unfortunately, we're stuck with this particular set of regulations. So, if the Department of Housing and Urban Development wants to release a new interim rule telling us that telling the county that could be a thing that's done, I think that we would all celebrate that decision. But it's not like comfort or consolation. But that specific idea has been explored and at least at one level shot down. I am not a lawyer, nor a congressman.
I would just add that this is an opportunity for federal advocacy to speak to your congressmen and your U.S. senators about this specific aspect of the paperwork. I know that we have just gone through a review of our HUD, the paperwork that's required for the lead remediation project to really make sure that it's not any more or any less than what's required. And we are also having conversations about how to reduce the amount of paperwork that's required. But we're also using HUD funds to pay for, I'll call them navigators, to help support the collection of those materials and the documentation that's required for that. And I also know that that's something that the county has been working on with its partners, but it's still a considerable amount of work to gather all of this documentation. And unfortunately, as Council President indicated, there does not seem to be flexibility that can be enacted at the local level. That would require a policy change at the federal level.
Fair enough. So I'll spin this a different way, away from actually these funds. Because we were talking about some savings earlier. What are the odds the city can put forward an effort to target some of the most struggling individuals with these delinquent debts and just outright forgive them due to the coronavirus pandemic?
So I'll weigh in on that, and just to say that we want to go through this process of the notification and trying to access the available funds.
For sure.
And we're going to see where we land. And if in the end we need to have a conversation about using the rescue plan funds, that's also something that we internally are having a conversation about. There's a document that Patrick and Barry are working on that's sort of the guide rails, general guidelines of the guidance on the guidance on the guidance, which I'm not exaggerating that, to help us understand how we can use those funds. And so at this point, what this conversation, and I appreciate about, is that this is a conversation about equity, and it's about process, and it's about ensuring equity between city customers and non-city customers, and making sure that that process is set up. We're going to restart this process if council would approve this change, and then we're going to track and monitor this over time because we are not interested in evicting people. We are interested in collecting payment when we know that there are these other resources that are available, and continuing to support the county in making sure that people know that these resources are available. So we're going to get down the road on this and probably circle back to council with updates as to how it's going. But for now, this is the starting point.
Okay, and then before I sit down, unrelated to funds, because I know this is really about an ordinance change, could you guys detail a little bit more about how the process of delinquency might go through a city resident versus a suburban resident? Personal opinion, I think that the city government, it works for the city constituents. If this were to, I feel that the city should work a little bit harder, have more avenues to assist its direct residents. I'm not saying that the people outside the city aren't worth effort, but it seems to be a good carrot to encourage people to join our municipality even if the rules are currently beneficial to the citizens of Lancaster City as opposed to the suburbs. That being said, everyone should have a fair process, but if this gives us more of an ability to help our direct residents in the city of Lancaster, I see a validity in keeping that difference.
And I would just say that we have to follow the PUC regulations, and what this is doing is enacting equity between city and suburban. And in the past, as the ordinance is written, it was inequitable and it was favoring suburban customers over city customers. And so by making this ordinance change, we are actually enacting equity between city and suburban and following the PUC regulations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dasher. There are no further comments from the public. I'll motion to move this to full council. I'll motion to move Administration Bill 1621 to full council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Second item on the agenda for Public Works, Administration Bill number 17, 2021, rescinding the COVID-19 construction ordinance. I believe Mr. Campbell, now you can come.
This one is me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So this particular introduction of termination of ordinance 1/2020 is taking us back to a period that we probably don't want to remember. If you remember back in April of last year, April of 2020, the directives came forward from the state level that all activity, much retail activity, and certainly all construction, et cetera, would come to a halt because of COVID and because there was not clarity about the guidelines or the regulations that would protect the construction workers and the people who have to interact with the construction workers. So as of May 12th, DPW proposed and council approved of an ordinance that established policies and regulations related to commercial construction within the city of Lancaster. It affected anything and everything that was vertical construction or horizontal construction, meaning buildings as well as the work that was done in the streets, the utility work, etc. In large part, it related to how do the construction entities arrive at the site, how do they keep themselves clean, sanitized, protected, how do they comply with COVID guidelines, and especially in those cases where the city has people to inspect the work, the construction work that was going on, how do the people representing the city, how are they protected in the course of doing that particular work? It also helps to protect residents or others who might come in contact with construction entities. It went into effect, and in those early months or so, there were a number of instances where we actually did have to enforce this ordinance, where there were large groups of people or contractors who were non-compliant. We had the weight of these regulations to be able to reinforce that we have to protect the construction workers as well as the people who interact with those construction workers. So to that extent, I consider it a tremendous success. And to the extent that we, as the city of Lancaster and the people involved in the construction work, were able to forestall a huge wave of people getting sick, I think that this was a contributory factor to that. As we all know, the numbers have dropped drastically over the last several months, and most of our contractors have been able to comfortably comply with not only the regulations, even if every once in a while we have to do a reminder to them. But at this particular moment, we believe that with the level of compliance and with the activity that's going on, which includes things like the Yule Plaza library construction, the work being done over on Marietta Avenue, etc., that we no longer need this ordinance to be in effect. If the ordinance was put into effect until it was deemed by DPW and by council to no longer be necessary, and we believe that at this moment it is no longer necessary. Does that mean that people just go willy-nilly and ignore caution? No. It is, the ordinance originally was consistent with construction guidelines, and those construction guidelines, both at the state level and the national level, still apply. And we have the ability to always either stop work if we believe that things are going in an unsafe manner, or if things are otherwise going in an untoward manner. But we do believe that at this particular moment, this ordinance is no longer necessary, and so we're asking that this be suspended.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Any questions from the committee or council? Any questions from the public? Well, I will motion to move Administration Bill number 17, 2021 to full council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Okay, thank you.
Third item on the agenda is Administration Resolution number 36, 2021, authorizing application for for a multimodal program grant. I believe, Mr. Campbell, that's you.
That is me as well. So this is I believe, a rather exciting project. This is one that is currently underway in one form or another. This is requesting multimodal transportation fund grant in the amount of $1.14 million from the Commonwealth Financing Authority to be used for the South Water Street Bicycle and Pedestrian Boulevard. So there's a larger project, which is the Water Street Bicycle and Pedestrian Boulevard, which extends from Harrisburg Pike all the way down to Fairview Avenue. The first portion of that had been funded a couple of years ago under the, hold on a second, under the TIP and SGT, the Transportation Improvement Program and Smart Growth Transportation Fund, to the tune of approximately $1.62 million from SGT, SGT, and there was about $200,000 of city funds to take care of engineering costs. Many of you may remember, before my time, there were a number of community outreach opportunities along North Water Street where the community was involved with artwork, with historic rectification of the Water Street, learning what the history of Water Street or Hoffman's Run, the original Hoffman's Run, may have been, etc., and to be able to design and establish the bike route from Harrisburg Pike down to Vine Street. This second part is the part from Vine Street down to Fairview Avenue. Much of it has already been designed based on another $200,000 that had been made available, I believe it was last year, so that the bike lane could find a way of negotiating some very peculiar public rights of way, especially from Fullerton Park down to the south portion. The overall project, when it was envisioned several years ago, was to the tune of approximately $4.8 million. The Smart Growth Transportation funding takes care of approximately $3.1 million of that. The $400,000 that the city had put in for design services takes us up to approximately $3.5 million, and the balance, about 1.14, is what we're seeking from the Commonwealth Finance Authority. So the city will have put in $400,000, SGT will have put in $3.1 million, and as a result, we're asking for the balance, Commonwealth Finance Authority, to put in the balance. Now, we actually have tightened our belts a little bit, so if you add up those numbers, they don't come up to the 4.8. We actually believe that in an effort for cost savings, etc., we can do it for just a little bit less. Historically, some of the PennVest or the Penn bid process has been giving us lower costs, so we believe that that can be done. We also believe that how we engage with the community these days will allow for a greater sense of public participation in that part of the process. So we're asking for the authority for the mayor to be designated as the official to execute all documents and agreements between the city and the Commonwealth Finance Authority to facilitate and assist in obtaining the requested grant.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. And what is the timeline for this grant? When will we be notified that we received it?
I believe, Patrick, you may know better than I, but I believe we'd be notified within several months.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee or council? Questions from the public? Tony? Sorry.
Sorry.
No
Mr. Dasher.
Tony Dasher, I don't know if I've been following the rules this whole time. Tony Dasher, 700 Block of New Holland Ave. Multimodal program grant is fantastic. I think it's an amazing program that we should utilize for the bus. I think as much as I love a good bike route, I mean, I used to bike around here all the time, leaving with all my camera equipment on me. Probably a little bit risky at times, but Do we have anything slated to work with Red Rose Transit Authority in terms of maybe getting a multimodal grant program with them? The bus, like, I take the bus semi-frequently, I'd like to imagine, especially considering I can drive around the city. What is our intention to build a relationship with Red Rose Transit Authority?
Their funding is, and their accountability lies with the county. And there is the Metropolitan Transportation Organization, the MTO, that both Mr. Campbell and I serve as members on, as well as other community members, and there's representation from City Council. We review the plans collectively, and that's a larger transportation effort that spans the county, and so they are the entity to which you can address suggestions that you have related to Red Rose Transit Authority and their functions and routes.
I've talked to Red Rose in the past about some of their potential opportunity for changes. So I guess my question would be, I understand the authority of Red Rose Transit Authority lies with the county.
Well, let me clarify that, Mr. Dastra. Red Rose Transit has an independent board of directors that operates the transit authority. As it relates to transportation planning and how they function, that is through the MTO, because that is coordinated countywide. So it's an independent authority. There's no funding from the city of Lancaster that goes to RRTA whatsoever.
Oh.
It is federal pass-through that comes from federally through the county to RRTA. So we don't have a stake in their board or any decision-making authority as it relates to RRTA.
So hypothetically, could the city compete with Red Rose Transit Authority if it so chose?
And how would we pay for that, Mr. Dastra?
That's not my question.
No, it is the question, which is, yes, we could potentially do that, but there would be a considerable cost to that for which we cannot afford.
Okay, so hypothetically, if we so chose, we could actually create like a city bus, like maybe even a city circulator.
Sure.
Okay.
And there's been a circulator that's been tried and it has failed financially.
Yeah, I do know that. I was just making sure that we could compete. Thank you for answering the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dastra. Any other comments from the public? With that, I'll motion to move Administration Resolution number 36, 2021 to full council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is Administration Resolution number 40, 2021, authorizing an agreement with the Central Market Trust. Mr. Campbell?
Yes, that is me again. So the Lancaster Central Market is its own trust, and it generates funds for its capital construction and some of its upkeep. Back in 2015, under ordinance number 16, 2005, the city agreed that we will be responsible for the facilitation, if you will, of any construction and upgrades to the work, and that the trust would be responsible for the funding that comes to that. There are two elements that require attention at this point. One is the replacement of the Central Market roof, which is a slate roof, and it's part of a historic building, as one may know, designed by James Warner, not by our native son, C.M. Lenormand, but there are also several major entry doors that also need to be restored and replaced. So the historic architecture firm of Hamill Associates has been hired by the trust to be able to design and implement this work, and we, the city of Lancaster, under the DPW, will manage and administer the bidding process and ensure that we've got the best prices, etc., on behalf of the trust and oversee the construction of that work. So it's an administrative resolution so that we are being given the authority, the ability, as per the earlier ordinance, to actually execute the work that we've been authorized to oversee.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
And I would just add, if I may, Counselor, that the original proposal included a price tag to the city to pay for those doors, and we've gone back and forth with Central Market Trust and their fund development efforts to raise those funds privately to support Central Market Trust, and in return, we would be administering the construction and the oversight, because that is expertise that we have, and we can provide that as an in-kind contribution. And the doors are like, I don't know, $60,000
So
a pair?
the last estimate was $80,000.
$80,000.
And that's a huge savings on our part to not have to come up with those funds, although we all want the doors to be the best doors they possibly can be, fully consistent with the original design of the building. And as you know, or as you may not know, the cost for renovation of the slate roofs, etc., would be approaching $400,000.
May I make a clarification? So I'm a member of the Central Market Trust Board, and the roof specifically, you may recall that a few years ago, the trust embarked on a capital campaign for the slate portion of the roof. This is specifically the tiles on the towers, which were not included in that original fundraising effort. So this is not the same as all of the investment that was made into the larger portion of the slate roof. This is a different tile portion of the roof. And also, the plan for the doors is to do them over a series of years, starting with the ones that are in most desperate need of repair. And that is also for security purposes for the market.
And if I may add as a clarification as well, although the roof is focusing primarily on the tile, it's also how it interlocks with the existing roof that had been done just a few years ago, so that the end product will be a full roof, a full, complete watertight roof, not just this piece versus that piece with gaps in between.
Thank you all for the clarification.
More than you, Brian.
Out of curiosity and forgive my ignorance, what is the relationship with the city and Central Market? So the trust and the agreement that was established before, what's the why behind that? What was the purpose between that relationship?
So it does predate me. Mayor, you may know better than I.
Councilor Baker, do you want to, as a board member?
I can take a swing at it. So the city owns the Central Market, but the trust, through that agreement, operates the day-to-day business of the market and controls the operational use of funds, but capital improvement projects and larger spends like this still come through the approval of the city. Did I get it right?
Yep, that's good.
Great, thank you for the clarification. Awesome. Any other questions from council? Any questions from the public? With that, I'll move to move Administration Resolution 40-2021 to full council. All in favor? Or, I'm sorry. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And for the final item on our agenda, Administration Resolution number 41-2021, converting temporary outdoor dining permits to annual permits. Mr. Campbell?
So I think this is a happier version of the previous COVID-related regulation. As a response to some of the needs of the commercial and the dining, the restaurant element of the city of Lancaster, back in June of 2020, we actually established a resolution that allowed for outdoor dining, so that restaurants who might feel that they were subject to or the disbeneficiary of COVID had an opportunity to continue their operations or have dining opportunities for many. It culminated in approximately 30 different permits/licenses in all, and they were spread throughout all 4 sectors of the city. It continues to be rather successful, and many have seen that it has added to the life and vitality of downtown Lancaster, as well as to many of the other communities throughout the city in which this kind of outdoor dining was made available. The ordinance allows that it would die at the determination of DPW with consent of the council. DPW at this point is recommending that it continue till the end of the year, to December 31st. Licenses and permits for this kind of activity all regularly die at the end of the year. But rather than suspend or prohibit the continuation of the outdoor dining, we believe that it is to the benefit of the vitality of downtown as well as economic development to continue the outdoor dining option in the permitting. So that is what this resolution is asking.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. And will businesses be able to reapply the following year or next year once this dies out at the end of the year?
This would die out at the end of the year, although we certainly are open to consideration of creative ways of exploring how the public right-of-way can be used. We know that several restaurants really, really enjoy it. Some of the public dining, which is common public dining, we're down to about 2 locations right now in downtown, and it is still being used quite well. But as any other license or permit, it would die without reapplication. And at this moment, we are looking for the opportunity to say yes, but at this moment, it would not be automatic that you'd be able to request outdoor dining. We're hoping that the restaurant community, etc., may actually say that they really like it, and we would do that.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Any questions from the committee or council?
I have one question. Mr. Campbell, has there been any kind of reservations or complaints from the disability community in regards to these, like outdoor dining?
So I will say that I am not aware of any. In occasions where there may have been something that came up, it was able to be addressed literally within that same day or within a day or so of it being raised. And it was usually raised directly either to the dining facility or it may have been raised to us at the same time. But when we then followed up, it had already been immediately addressed. Now, many of these facilities are not naturally ADA accessible. This, in fact, provided opportunities for accessibility that in some cases had not been available before.
Very true.
If you had to go up or down several stairs to get into the establishment, but you had the opportunity to just walk over or get yourself seated on an outdoor dining, that was to your benefit.
Great. I really appreciate that insight. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Any other questions from the council? Any questions from the public? With that, I will motion to move Administration Bill 41, 2021 to full council.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
With that concludes the Public Works Committee, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. All right, we'll move then to the Public Safety Committee of Council. Councilor Garcia Molina.
Thank you, Mr. President. So with Public Safety Committee, we have 2 agenda items. The first one, which I'm really excited about, I'm sure you are too aware, is Administration Resolution number 38, 2021, appointing Chief John Bay as our City Police Chief. Are you going to be speaking to that one, or?
I think that it speaks for itself. I'm not sure, happy to take any questions from council or the public.
I just want to say, Izzy and I took part in the search for chief, and it was a very lengthy process. It was a very intentional process, and even though we ended with Chief John Bay, I think it speaks to how intentional we were as a city to really trying to find the best candidate who was able to kind of come alongside this vision that we have for policing and build something new, which is really refreshing. So I'm really excited to have John with us. And Izzy, anything you want to add? Anyone else?
Yeah, are the, now that we're through the process, are the broad numbers of the process? So we reviewed upwards, we received upwards of 30 applications, reviewed more than 20 applicants, conducted 2 days of interviews with representatives of the small business community, students in the school district, representatives of the NAACP. Indeed, it was a really broad, I think, cross-section of both the unexpected and expected stakeholders. And there was a really robust discussion that led to the most qualified candidates being delivered to the mayor's office, who then selected among the 3 of them the man who has heretofore been interim chief John Bay. I'll say, without talking too much about the past, having talked to a lot of candidates, I was very excited about. Now that we have John, I can say that in the 8 months that we've had John, there were a number of changes to policing, both in terms of policy and community outreach, that we were previously told simply could not be done. So, I'm certainly, I don't get a vote on this committee, but I'm certainly looking forward to having this ratification come before full council.
Any questions or comments from council?
Just a comment, Councilor Garcia. Just wanted to thank you guys and the mayor for a transparent process. I think from the beginning, just outlining what was going to occur and also including various stakeholders from the community was very valuable. So I very appreciate you guys going through the process for it, and excited for Chief A this group.
Thank you, Councilor. Any questions or comments from the public? So with that, I'll make a motion to move administration resolution number 38, 2021 to full council on July 13th. All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, our last one is administration resolution number 39, 2021, authorizing application for a burn justice assistance grant.
I'll speak to this. So year to year, this is funding that we receive that is formulaic. We get a certain amount of dollars from the Burn Justice Assistance Grant based on our census data. And each year we write a proposal for what these funds will be utilized for. And this year we will be utilizing these funds to purchase 8 bicycles, which was under the heading told that would never happen again. We are now doing it, which is bicycle patrols. And our officers are reporting just a lot of great interaction with the public, and it's going well, and so we want to purchase some more bicycles. We have trained about 12 officers, and there are other officers that receive bicycle training, and Chief Bay himself is looking forward to going through that training and becoming certified to do bicycle patrols, which I think is pretty awesome. And in addition, we are going to be doing a complete review top to bottom of our internal affairs, procedures, and processes. As you know, we have Lieutenant Stoltzfus and Sergeant Lopez, who are in our IA office, and want to give a thorough review of the process in which we review complaints, both civilian complaints as well as identified discipline issues within the department and how they are handled to create a fair, clear, consistent, and transparent process for how those any issues that are elevated to internal affairs are managed. So that's what the grant funding will be used for.
Thank you, Mayor. Any questions or comments from council?
Just a process question for the bike patrols, and I've seen them and appreciated them. Are there restrictions currently on parts of the city in which those patrols happen, and will this help expand that?
You know, that's a great question. I believe that we have bike patrols in every sector, and they are required in every shift. The degree to which we have staffing every day for in every shift in every sector is highly variable, especially in the summer.
Right. I understand. Thank you.
Any other questions? Questions or comments from the public? All right. So I'll make a motion to move administration resolution number 39, 2021 to full council on July 13th. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. And that concludes public safety, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Garcia Molina. That brings us to the Committee of the Whole. There is one item on the agenda for the Committee of the Whole, so if you were watching along with last month's council meeting, we tabled an item concerning the compensation of the mayor of the city of Lancaster, as we did not have someone here to present on the matter. This evening, we have Mr. Hopkins here to make a presentation to council on this item, and the mayor has excused herself from the meeting to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest. So I guess we'll begin then with Mr. Hopkins.
Thanks, Council President. I have it down. By the end of the year, we'll get this completely figured out, and now my screen is going blank. So, some reason this keeps changing. Okay, here we go. So, as Council President said, there was discussion at the last, I believe it was the June committee meetings about this ordinance. We've made a revision, so what is now in the proposed bill number 14 is different language than what you saw at the June meeting. That prior language had included 1.5% increases for the next 4-year term for the office of the mayor, and I want to make it clear that what I'm talking about, I'm going to refer to office of mayor rather than an individual, because, and especially as it relates to, and where is things going? As it relates to the proposed ordinance. Oh, come on, system.
Councilor Baker, is it the computer or is it the connection? I'm going to jiggle it on there.
That's why IT people always say, one, is your computer plugged in, and two, just reboot and maybe something will happen. So, where was I? So, as it relates to the language of the ordinance that's in front of you now, this is really language that would propose to change not just the salary of the office of mayor in the next 4-year term, but set up a process for that going forward, so beyond just the next 4 years. What I wanted to start with was a little bit of context about why we are where we are right now in terms of the salary of the office of mayor. So I wanted to start first with this sort of box on the left-hand side. And what you, for those of you who are looking at the screen, this is the actual by ordinance set of salaries for office of the mayor since 2009. As you can see, 2009 was at $77,932. That was a result of an ordinance that was adopted actually in 2005 that set the salary for the office of mayor for the years 2006, 7, 8, and 9. So the first 4-year term when Mayor Gray was in office. At the end of that 4-year term, the there was a decision made to not bring another 4-year salary ordinance to City Council, and the end result of that was that the salary for Office of the Mayor was frozen, because if there is not an ordinance in place prior to a certain date, and I'll get to that certain date in a minute, if there's not an ordinance in place for a certain date, then the salary for the Office of Mayor is frozen at the last ordinance level. So in this case, it was frozen not just for this 4-year term of the mayor, but also for this 4-year term of the mayor. What that resulted in was a salary for Office of Mayor that was growing more and more out of whack with with increases in just general cost of living, but also as it related to other positions within the city of Lancaster. Office of Mayor is an unusual position. It's the only full-time elected position in the city. The responsibilities of the position are significant. Oversight and management of a $120+ million budget, nearly 600 full-time employees, responsibility not just for operations of the city of Lancaster, as most people understand it, but also ultimately for supervision of the water and sewer systems. Clearly, there are department directors who do a lot of the day-to-day work. One would be, I've worked for 3 different mayors. This is not just a full-time job. It is a full-time job times many. And so while it does not make sense for the Office of Mayor position to have a salary that is the highest, which is in a normal organization, the chief executive officer of the organization is typically the highest compensated. In our structure, it's different. It is an elected position. There is, I don't know what term you would want to apply to it, but a discounting of the mayor's salary compared to other positions, because those other positions we're competing with the private marketplace and also public marketplace for talent, and for that talent you have to have compensation is competitive. That's a little bit different for Office of the Mayor position because it's an elected position. That being said, right now the salary that was set is $85,000. And the reason that that was the base for this 4-year term of mayor. The way that we got there was we looked at this column here and said if the Office of Mayor's salary had been increased at 1% every year since 2009, it would be at $85,233. And we just rounded to the nearest thousand, so it ended up at $85,000. And then the salary each year thereafter was increased at 1.5%. So that's how we got to the salary level that we are at right now for Office of the Mayor, which is the $88,883. The certain date that I talked about, there's actually conflicting legal guidance on this. What the solicitor has told us is that the language that is in the code, and this is third-class city code, states that the salary of the mayor shall be enacted at least 2 days prior to the last day fixed by law for candidates to withdraw their name from nominating petitions. What is conflicting is that there are 2 times during the calendar year in an municipal election year, when a candidate can withdraw. One is before the primary election, and the other is before the general election. Our interpretation is that what makes sense is that we're talking about the general election, because that's when there's an opportunity for anybody, whether they ran in a primary or they didn't run in a primary, to get on the ballot with nominating petitions, and then ultimately they have an opportunity to withdraw those nominating petitions. So in this case, the last day for withdrawal by candidates nominated at the primary is August 9th. So we think that's the date by which any change in the salary ordinance for Office of Mayor needs to be done. So basically during the month of July. If that doesn't happen, then the Office of Mayor salary will be frozen at that $88,883 for the next 4-year term. For obvious reasons, I don't think that makes sense. I think that, again, the Office of Mayor salary has gotten more and more disconnected from the salary structure for the rest of the city. I looked this up, and if you look at the budgeted salaries of all full-time city employees, that salary, $88,883, I think is 78th on the list. So that's, almost a quarter of the city's entire employee base as a annual compensation, and that doesn't include any overtime earned or anything like that. Base compensation higher than the salary of the Office of the Mayor. I think that's a disconnect that doesn't make sense. The other comparisons that I wanted to show you here is that if we had, if that base salary of $779.32 had been increased at 1.5% per year, the salary in 2021 would have been $93,177. If it had been increased from 2009 through 2021, the average non-union city employee salary is increased at 1.6%. That's base salary. That doesn't include merit payments that are made on an annual basis. But that's base salary. If that had been the case, the mayor's salary in 2021 would have been $93,631, so just over the prior one. And then if we look at all city employees, and this is all combined, so police, fire, and AFSCME employees, all of whom operate under a collective bargaining agreement. If I mix those salary increases over that period of time since 2009 to 2021, the increase is about 2.43%, and that would be have the mayor's office of the mayor's salary at $103,208. So just for comparison purposes, that's sort of how we got to where we are and how where we are compares to some other escalators. The other thing that I did is looked at the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics has a CPI, Consumer Price Index calculator. And so I looked at, I went back 20 years. So 20 years from when the new salary scale would take place with this proposed ordinance. In 2002, January 2002, the Office of Mayor salary is $69,242. If that had increased at Consumer Price Index nationally, that would have it would be a salary of $102,272. So somewhere a little bit less than, but close to the salary that would have been where had the salary increased at the city employee average. And then the other one that I looked at was in 2009, so when the Mayor Gray's salary was frozen, if the salary of the mayor had increased at CPI from that point forward, it would be at this $95,879. So clearly, in comparison, these two salaries matching up where we are right now is they're both fairly significantly higher. So what we have in this proposal is that, as I said earlier, it doesn't just handle the next 4-year period of the Office of Mayor, but it handles things going forward, much the same way that the state handled this issue back in 1995. Similar to, and this is the section of Act number 51 of 1995, that's a public official compensation law. This is actually a larger law that addresses the governor's office, the Office of Governor's salary, and a whole bunch of other appointed and elected positions throughout the state. But what it does is sets in this case in 1995, it had the base rate of a member of the General Assembly, whether it's senator or House member. And then established by law that each year when the Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes this consumer price index for all urban customers in the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland area, when that number is published or determined, then that's what the increase is going to be for the coming year for members of the General Assembly. This is as data-based as you can get in terms of establishing a salary level. What it does is takes any of the sort of extraneous or other arguments that are out there, either for, a mayor should just have their salary frozen for forever, or, we don't think that this particular individual as the office of mayor deserves a salary increase for this 1 year because something XYZ happened. It takes any of those arguments out of the picture and just says that we're going to establish a baseline for office of mayor salary, and going forward, that salary is going to change only based on the consumer price index under this calculation. One of the other benefits that this has, aside from setting a salary on an ongoing basis, is that the timeline for when this gets published in the Pennsylvania Bulletin lines up well with our budget process. So this is just one of the ads that was, not an ad, this is what's actually published in the Pennsylvania Bulletin. This was in 2019, and it stated, that second underline there, just what the CPI was for the prior period, and that's what the compensation for members of the General Assembly that are going to see as an increase in their annual wages. The other piece of this that I don't have a slide for, but it reflects what was done this year by the legislature and that we're also proposing in this ordinance. The legislature, essentially, they will get, the members of the General Assembly will get that CPI increase automatically unless they take action to do something otherwise. And in 2020, they took action to put a freeze on their salary. Regardless that CPI went up, they voted to put a freeze on their salary that started in December of 2020 and goes through November 30th of 2021. So they took a legislative action to freeze their salary. The way this ordinance is written is that in the future, if the legislature would take that kind of an action and freeze their salary, the mayor's salary would also freeze. So what we've done to reflect that freeze is have the first year, the base of under this ordinance be set at $88,883, which is a freeze from the current 2021 salary. So the ordinance is written so that it's $88,883 as the annual salary for office of mayor for 2022, and then thereafter it would increase by that consumer price index. So that's a review of the proposal that you have in front of you. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. The committee is council, so councilors, questions, comments?
I don't really have a question per se, but just something to throw this out there for the conversation. I really appreciate, Patrick, the way that you broke it down as like not looking at the individual. But I think it's important to look at the individual because what I'm interpreting this as is like for the last mayor's administration, we had a white man with money that could afford to freeze her salary, and now we have a second female mayor. And so the conversation that's being had is also about cutting pay for the mayor. So I think that that's like not a viable option for us when we're looking at equity. Our second mayor that's a female, should not be making less money than her male counterparts within her team. Also, when we're looking at who's going to be our next mayor after this mayor, hopefully in my mind, given our diversity, it's going to be a person of color. So if we're looking at, if we're building salary that's equitable to work, especially for people of color and for women, I think that this is a conversation that we need to look at. What I do appreciate also is that there is that freeze, because it is a viable concern of the community that during this pandemic year, and as we're figuring out finances, we're not increasing salaries. But if we're looking at the totality of what we're talking about here in terms of is the salary pay equitable and fair, it's frankly not. And it was set up that way by an individual who had the privilege to do so. So I don't really have a question. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councilor Garcia.
I do have one question, Patrick.
Sure.
Can you just go back to the very end of what you said about the action that can be taken to, so this is putting in motion steps for the future. The action that could be taken in the future if we didn't want this to continue. Who takes it, how, and why?
So that's a good question. So this would set in place the structure going forward unless two things happen. One is that the legislature decides they're going to pass a piece of legislation that says, despite what, you know, Act 51 of 1995 says, we're going to freeze salaries for members of the General Assembly. That would kick in a freeze in this schedule. Regardless if it happens in the next 4 years, it happens 10 years down the road. The other thing is that, you know, this is a local ordinance. So city council, this city council, future city councils have purview over changes. The only thing that can't happen in the adoption of this type of salary ordinance is that the term is the salary and emoluments. So emoluments is like all of the other stuff that comes with a position, benefits and things like that. Can't be changed during an elected official's term of office. And that's a Pennsylvania constitutional matter. So it's the same issue that came up when council was discussing a change in this in the annual compensation for members of council. You can't change either up or down a council member's salary during the term that they are in. The same thing goes for office of mayor. So theoretically, you know, if city council were to move this forward and vote on this, it would set those salaries for 2022 and beyond. But if a council in 2026 decided we want something different, that council could make that decision, but it wouldn't take effect until the next 4-year term of whichever mayor that happens to be.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
I do have a comment, Mr. President, if I may. Yeah, I think, first of all, thank you for breaking this down.
Sure.
It helps kind of put some, just gives us a clearer picture on what salaries look like and how it's made up and how we get to these numbers. I do think one comment you had mentioned was other positions within city government we're competing with the private marketplace. I would argue even for an elected position like the mayor, we probably are as well. As a resident of the city of Lancaster, I would hope that we attract skilled, qualified candidates to run a very large organization, which is the city government of Lancaster. So I think fair compensation is that, and to echo Councilor Garcia Molina's comments. When we look at folks that have the privilege of being able to take a pay cut or not get paid competitively with the market, there are going to be other demographics, people of color, women, other groups that typically don't get equal pay within other organizations that, you know, need to support a family, whatever, might not be, maybe not go up for this type of role. So I think we want to encourage a diverse set of candidates in the future and make sure that we are paying competitively if we want a well-run city. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Yeah, yes to all of that. Yeah.
But that's all I have.
Okay, if there are no other council comments or questions, we'll take them from the public.
All right, take my mask off for this one, it's getting hot in here. So, the mayor approached me about this, and you know, I think my perspective's been changed somewhat slightly. And I actually think that the point of equal pay is the most valid point to make here. And I'm here to talk about the executive leadership team and equal pay. Because we created a new position under this administration, the Department of Neighborhood Engagement. We split it out of the Department of Economic Redevelopment and Neighborhood Revitalization. Previously, under Mayor Gray, we only had one female director, and that was Charlotte Katzenmoyer. She was the highest paid of all those individuals. 2018 budget shows the Public Works Director being paid $145,000. That position is still the highest paid position of the directors, and we've gone through a lot of organizational change. Now I want to list the salaries of each of these 8 positions. Chief of Police, $145,000. Director of Public Works, $150,296. Economic Development, $148,263. Business Administration, $133,748. Fire Chief, $122,692. Neighborhood Engagement, I'll get there actually, let's go down the line to the other. City Solicitor, $126,250. Those are the male positions in the Mayor's Executive Leadership Team. The other two positions, Chief of Staff is paid $97,613, and the Department of Neighborhood Engagement, the newest of these positions, and personally in my view as a city resident, the most valuable, because our opinion, our engagement, should be valuable to the city, is paid $85,617. The average of these 8 positions is $126,000, $185, which actually puts all of the male individuals on the executive leadership team above the average. That means that the Department of Neighborhood Engagement is getting paid almost 68% to the dollar of that average, and Chief of Staff 74.4% to that average. That's concerning for me. And it's concerning that we're talking about equal pay and we're not looking at the whole structure of the organization. I actually think your proposal here is very nice, Mr. Hopkins. I think that it is a very reasonable approach. I think using CPI is something I love to see. It's something I've talked about in the past in regards to payments like the Marriott project. I think that to adjust based off the way the world works is the most sensible thing, and keep a fight away. We shouldn't really be arguing about these points. But I do think it's important that the Mayor's Executive Leadership Team gets paid equitably. I would encourage the 3 of you that are present in the room, potentially, I don't know how you would negotiate amongst yourselves if you can do anything about that, because I think budget increases to balance are interesting. I suppose they're valid. It would be cool to see us balance this internally first. But I think that if we're going to go with this plan, at a minimum, if we're worried about the executive leadership team and equal pay, we should start on the basis. I wish I could be up here saying that just increase the pay for the other individuals or average it all out. I don't know how you guys feel about that. So my only sensible approach to this is to, instead of $8,883, set that figure at what the Department of Neighborhood Engagement currently gets paid, which is $85,617. That would ensure that the mayor, in conjunction with their executive leadership team, does not get paid any less than any individual on that team. The mayor could switch regularly, potentially. I mean, doesn't have to be a 4-year term necessarily. So I think that there's something to consider in the fact that you've served under 3 mayors. In my logic, you should be the highest paid as someone who hasn't been removed from the organization. You have a lot of institutional knowledge. The mayor being a position that can change from time to time, and some people see being a city mayor as the quote-unquote low end of politics. People aspire for presidential and Senate races, things like that. But we know that this work is important. I'm not trying to devalue that. But I think if we're seriously going to have a conversation about equity and equal pay, we need to look at the executive leadership team, and I think this plan should be reevaluated to reflect the current levels of pay of the executive leadership team, unless during the month of July, the executive leadership team would like to renegotiate their own salaries amongst themselves. I don't know if you're allowed to do that, but just as a suggestion, I feel that, again, this formula is, I like this. I do think that we need to think about where we're starting, given the pays of the rest of other city employees, specifically in my argument here, the executive leadership team. I think that, personally, I think we need to value neighborhood engagement as more than that. So maybe we can do a conjunction here, maybe work a bunch of things together. I think this is a weird conversation to have in regards to equal pay, because it is the only full-term elected position in the city. It seems like an apples to orange comparisons with the other positions. Thank you guys for your time. I didn't break the rules, did I?
You're fine, Joe.
All right. Thank you.
So, if you don't mind, I think my immediate reaction to the why question, I'll say, in 2018, when we were considering raising city taxes, I remember in that budget meeting, in fact, it was suggested that Millsy should take a pay cut. I tend to agree with you, Mr. Dastra. Millsy has one of the most important jobs. And I'm happy to say now that when we see a budget draft, I would love to see a raise for the director of the Department of Neighborhood Engagement. But to answer specifically one of the questions that you mentioned, because I think it's important, the mayor's salary, different than the other director's salaries, can't just be set in the budget process. So this is happening here, and those will happen in the budget process. But I agree wholeheartedly, especially because, you know, at the time, not only was Millsy the only woman on the EL team in 2018, she was the only person of color, and she was making the least, and there was talk of cutting her salary. So I agree with you wholeheartedly on that front. And I'll stop talking for a moment. Councilor Garcia.
The only other thing that I was going to add is, I don't know if Patrick could speak to this, but I know Sharon Allen Span is leading the fair wage kind of assessment. And
well, it goes beyond wages, but yeah, she's the leadership development and diversity manager for the city. So her scope of authority and influence is much more than just on the salary level.
But specifically, they are looking at wages.
Yes.
And wages in particular in regards to identity and.
Yeah, and so let me, I'll address that part first, and then I'll talk generally about compensation process. So in terms of that work, Sharon's work, and looking at salary levels, I mean, one of the restrictors that we have on us is collective bargaining agreements, right? So those are set through negotiations between the city and each of the 3 bargaining units. Salary levels, annual wage levels are set by position and or rank. You know, in the AFSCME structure, an equipment operator is X, and equipment operator 2, which has a little bit more responsibilities, is set at a higher wage. But those are set in a scale. For police and fire, obviously, it's by their years of service and or rank, and that's how their compensation is set. So the equity piece, at least in theory, you know, in the bargaining world, is that it's equitable because the same position, regardless of an individual's, gender identity, sexual orientation, race, none of that matters. It's you're in this position and this is what your wage is. It's a lot murkier, obviously, in the non-bargaining world. And there we have, that is typically where the comparison with the market really comes into play, because if we're trying to hire, an IT, somebody who specializes in information technology systems, whatever, that market right now is super competitive, and typically for an employer to get a really high quality candidate, they have to offer a higher salary. Each time one of those things happens in a structure where we only have, I think it's about 90 positions in the city that are non-bargaining and so not subject to a labor contract, bringing in one new individual at a certain salary through market ends up having this whole sort of review of the process of salary compensation. We've gone through and are actually in the midst of a compensation review by McLean & Company, the same firm that we're working with on the diversity, equity, and inclusion work, to look at an equitable process that identifies the scopes of responsibility for certain positions, the number of individuals that they supervise, their education level, a whole set of individual factors, so that we can have an equitable process for that whole non-bargaining set of employees. So that's hopefully responsive to that question. In terms of individual salaries of members of the executive leadership team, really is kind of looking at the same types of issues. So, and again, salary conversations are always awkward conversations, so I'll just name that, and it is what it is. I talked earlier, talking about the water ordinance, and that, we're in an unusual situation where we own and operate our own water and sewer systems. The Public Works Director is the one, is the director responsible for that work. The span of responsibility, the span of budget, and the span of the number of employees that report up through the chain of command within Public Works. So the Public Works Director is the largest budget, the largest number of employees, the most complicated, regulatory matters, all that sort of thing. That's reflected in the salary of the Public Works Director position. Other positions have significantly less budget overview, the position of Director of Neighborhood Engagement, while it has that title, it is not. There isn't actually a Department of Neighborhood Engagement. It is a piece of the Mayor's office. So it's technically it's within the executive department within the city structure. And so you have to look at all of those factors, not just an individual who's a member of an executive leadership team, whether at this city or any other one. But it's really sort of the whole scope of different things that go into a position that drive what the either what the salary is for somebody who has been a long-time employee here, or what the market might bear when we're in competition with others.
One of the things for the budget process as it moves forward this year, just like last year where I had a lot of questions around race equity, can we look to prioritize how that study is impacting the budgets? Can we make sure that we have that conversation?
That process started several months ago, and so that it would be a lead-in, and we would have that ready for the budget. So if there are changes in non-bargaining salaries that relate to that study, they'll be reflected in the budget process.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council or the public? Okay. Hearing none, I will hear a motion to move this to council on the 13th. It's the 13th. First reading.
Yes, so moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Having extensively exhausted comment, Mr. Harris. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, right,
Your committee of the whole right now.
Right.
We're in committee right now.
Yeah, so, okay, cool, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, that brings us to your report.
Yes, Mr. President. First, I sent this to you in writing, just to go through some of these things. In writing, in the last month, I prepared resolutions recognizing Pride Month, Healthy Homes Month, and Juneteenth. I drafted a council policy. I sent letters to newly appointed civil service board members. For research, I provided the COVID ordinance, a COVID ordinance to the solicitor, and another one to the zoning clerk. I provided a copy of the bond ordinance to the grant administrator. Search for water system records for a document that would have conveyed water lines to the city. For road dedication ordinances, I also searched I searched our streetlight maintenance agreement. And I provided a 1975 ordinance to the solicitor, and researched county park land records for a consulting engineer. Regarding the return to in-person meetings, at the request of the chief of staff, I reviewed the council chambers calendar to ensure there wouldn't be any conflicts for in-person meetings for the various boards, commissions, and authorities. I drafted a press release regarding return to in-person meetings. I reviewed, removed virtual meeting information from the city hall entrance. Met with the city facilities manager to discuss technology arrangements. Under statement of financial interests, I received the what I expected the last of the 2020 statements of financial interests from the Parking Authority, Downtown Investment District Authority, Convention Center Authority. Closed the book on that for the year. Lancaster Parking Authority, I attended their virtual meeting on the 24th and sent you a summary of that. And I attended the Juneteenth flag racing, and I carried a bunch of emails with other city clerks about their reopening plans.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. All right, if that is all this evening, thank you all for sticking in. I know we're closing on 3 hours here, but we appreciate it. I will hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Oh, I love this thing.
What is that?